Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
I can remember being a teenager and being in an argument with my brother once. And we were in a really knockout, drag-out argument, fight about something. And this is beyond the age when we would normally just physically start hitting each other, right? Because we're more mature, we're teenagers. So we didn't get into a physical altercation, but we're verbally at each other's throats. And I have my position, and I'm absolutely certain I'm right. And my brother's got his position. He's absolutely certain he's right. And this is the first time this had ever happened to me in my life. So that's why it's so clear, and I have a clear memory of this. My brother, in the midst of arguing, just turns to me and goes, "You know what? You're right. I'm wrong. I think you're right on this." And I remember, still to this day, it was just like almost 30 years ago. No, 20 some years ago. Like I remember the feeling like I got sucker punched when he did that. When he went ahead and said, "You know what, you're right," and I won the argument. I mean, quote unquote, won the argument, right? I felt like a loser in that moment. I felt like I'd lost something. And I remember feeling this compulsion to not let him walk away like this. I have to make sure that I win. I don't just have him surrender to me or just like give in or agree to something. Like I felt like I needed to prove him wrong. And so I remember feeling like I started re-engaging. I started the argument up again, and I'm coming at him, and I'm following the next room, and I'm going at him. I remember this so clearly. I've had this happen in other times in my life, but this was the first time it had happened in such a profound way. And he completely took the oxygen out of my argument. He completely just removed all of the emotion that I had connected to this and all the engagement. I was in it. And I remember that so clearly because I've noticed in our modern world now, I've seen people get what they want, maybe politically, maybe socially, maybe in arguments, maybe on a big level, like they've gotten some policy put through on a political level, or some business win, they've gotten a new market share, or maybe down at the personal micro level where they've won an argument with someone or they've gotten what they wanted. And they have a hard time with this. I've seen people like struggle with that. And it's almost like we have a hard time as humans being good winners when it works out for us. I don't know if we have a lot of skill or we know how to be in this, because I think it happens, first of all, rarely for people. I think a true win for someone is a rare thing. And I don't think we know what to do sometimes when it happens. I mean, we've all played Monopoly or some other board game where you have some jerk at the table. And I've done this too, so I'm pointing to myself. After like, "Yeah, I won in your face. Domination, I win. Yeah, everybody goes down." You know, you're bragging about your winning. We obviously don't like people like that. We can look at that and go, that's a poor winner. They don't win with grace. They act like a jerk when they win. I'm guilty of it much younger. Hopefully I don't do that now, but I've done that before. And I think all of us identify at least having somebody around us that's done that before. So today on this podcast, Antonia and I want to talk a little bit about what are the ingredients. What does it mean to be a good winner? How can you, as you maybe get what you want in life, how do you show up in the best way? And how can we be better at winning so that when we know and have trust that people are better winners, I think we will also trust when we can capitulate and say, "You know what? I'm going to go ahead and give you this win as another human because I know you're going to be a good winner when I grant this to you."
I think that there is a lot of value to being both a good winner and a good loser. And I think that we spend more time emphasizing the importance of being good losers because nobody likes a wormy loser, right? When you lose and you get really mad about it and your ego thrashes and you have to make the other person wrong because you can't handle it. Like we observe that in children, and I think that we are pretty up on making sure that people are not bad losers. Maybe we're not, though. I think I've seen a lot of bad losers as adults these days, so maybe we haven't really insisted on that. But it seemed to me when I was growing up that was something that adults were very concerned with, making sure people were good losers. And the one component of being a good winner, like you mentioned, I think that we try to teach our children is to not gloat, like you mentioned. Like, be gracious. If you've won, try to be gracious. But there's other components that make us bad winners other than just gloating. I think some of the other things that make us poor winners are when we can't accept that we won. Just like you mentioned, Joel, it was such a weird moment that you didn't want him to simply capitulate in sort of a shruggy, I don't care. You care about this more than I care. So effectively what he did when you mentioned he took the oxygen out of the argument is your brother effectively said, you care about this more than I do, so I'm just going to give it to you. And what you really wanted was him to care as much as you and also capitulate, right?
That's right.
And so being a poor winner in that moment was to try to reignite and reignite the arguments, re-engage to get him to care again and then dominate him.
I wanted to stick it to him emotionally. I wanted to feel something. I wanted him to like really understand it.
That's right.
I didn't really want what I wanted. I wanted him to feel something more than what I wanted.
Yeah. Well, because you quote unquote won that argument, but you didn't get him to feel crushed, and that's what you wanted.
That's right.
And so, being a poor winner is also enjoying the feeling of somebody else's defeat in front of you. And I mean, if you keep it to yourself, maybe you're allowed to have a little bit of that and sort of contend with that internally. But when you insist on that dynamic happening in the outside world so you can experience it in real life, like in real time, that's a poor winner. And I think as I'm thinking about it, the next thing that makes somebody a poor winner is, and you even mentioned this before when we were talking about it earlier, is overreach. Oh, I won, so therefore I get to have all of these other things, right? It's this idea of, winning automatically says something about what I'm entitled to. And that's also a poor winner.
Yeah, that's presidents do this all the time. I have a mandate now. I won the presidency. That means the whole country's behind me, and I can just do these policies because I have won the election.
Right, yeah. Executive order, executive order, executive order. Right, I'm just going to sign a bunch of things in. So there is also the overreach element of being a poor winner. Like, if I win, then I get to do all this stuff, and you just have to eat it. And then on the flip side, being a poor loser, I think, isn't just getting mad or angry. I think that's the first thing that we think of. But I think being a poor loser also is when you seek retribution, right? Like you suddenly plot the other person's demise. And when you're in a competition, I can understand that to some extent. When you're going 1-to-1 in a competitive sport, say, and you lost that round, getting reanimated for the next round, right? Like sort of getting reinvigorated and determined that you're going to win the next time. That's not a part of being a bad loser. I think that's part of competition. The point of competition is getting more calibrated, becoming a better performer. And so having that galvanize you to want to do better next time, I think is part of losing. I think it's one of the best things about losing is that galvanizing effect. But when you want retribution, almost like revenge for the experience, and you'll get it however you can get it, not the next 1-to-1 competition, but like, maybe getting a coalition behind you or trying to come after the person because you've got sour grapes. That would be an example of being a poor loser. And then I think finally, pretending you don't care or deprioritizing the importance of this loss, not actually allowing it to do what losing is intended to do, which is calibrate you, observe when you test iterated something and it didn't work out, and so learning the lessons of that, and also contending with your ego. One of the best things about losing is that every loss is a little bit of an ego death. It's just like this moment because you had an image of yourself, you put that image to the test, it didn't bear out in the outside world, and you got really important feedback to calibrate to modesty, to understand what your limitations actually are at this time. But you didn't like that message, and so you pretended like it was no big deal. That's another component of being a bad loser.
You're trying to reframe it into something else.
Yeah, exactly. And the challenge with both being a poor loser and a poor winner, both of these things, even though we're going to mostly, I think, talk about being a poor winner because that's something that we see really lacking in this world. The thing about both of these is that they have both of these experiences can be nutrient dense. I've started to see almost everything, information, experiences, anything that allows us to, in that DIKW model, data, information, knowledge, wisdom. The higher quality the data, the more likely it is to lend itself to information. The higher quality information is more likely to lend itself to knowledge, and then from knowledge to wisdom. And high quality, all of these things, high quality data, information, knowledge, wisdom. And by the time you get to knowledge and wisdom, by the way, experience has to be part of it. You cannot have knowledge and wisdom without test iterating it in the outside world. You have to have experienced it. When you get really high quality feedback, I've started to see those as food, right? Nutrient dense experiences, nutrient dense information. And when you are both a poor winner and a poor loser in any sort of competitive frame, you strip the nutrients of those experiences. You don't allow yourself to get the meal that for your brain that experience afforded you. And so when you are seeking things that will make you better, right? What do nutrients do? Nutrients enliven us. They give us energy. They make us stronger. They help us grow better. When you strip the nutrients out of an experience, then you deny yourself all of those really great side benefits. And being both a poor winner and a poor loser will strip the nutrients from the experience. You won't get all of the benefits of strength, stamina, energy, growth. You deny yourself all of those things simply by not allowing yourself to experience graciousness.
I think most people plan to fight, but they do not plan to win. I don't think most people that set out in a fight or in an argument or a political debate or a business strategy, I don't think they expect to win. I think most people don't expect to win. They think it's going to be an ultimate pursuit. And you can also see this based on the metrics they set up for what winning is, right? It has to be this ultimate perfect thing way up here. It's not a real measurable thing. It's almost like a lot of these things are ideals. Like if you look at a political discourse, two people on different sides of an aisle fighting over something, usually it's not about a specific thing. It's more of an idealism that they want people to adopt as a belief structure. It's not about a thing they want or an outcome they want. And often I see people engage in battle without a plan of what happens if you win this battle or what happens if you get what you want. First of all, I don't see a lot of clarity in what winning looks like. There's not a lot of definition of what a win means. They don't have a metric of accomplishing something. And I think it's something human nature. We like the fight. We like to be in the struggle. We're like a dog chasing a car. Have you ever driven down the freeway or highway, not the freeway, the highway, past an animal that's loose, a dog that's loose, and it starts barking and chasing your vehicle? I always wonder what happens if the dog catches the car. Has this dog planned on what it's going to do if it wins in this scenario, right? It thinks it's chasing some kind of prey or some kind of hostility. It's all amped up and it's fully engaged. It's barking and chasing. But what happens if it catches the car? And I think that's how a lot of people approach their battles in life. They approach life as, I'm going to have to struggle at this forever because it's such a big battle. I'll never actually win this. We might have small wins on the way, but it's a perpetual battle indefinitely. And so when they have a win, it's very unexpected for most people. And they have no idea what to do with it. They have no idea how to be gracious and how to win well. First of all, it doesn't happen for many people because they don't actually have a metric. But if they do have a metric and they achieve it, I don't think they know what to do afterward.
Well, I think in the situations you're talking about, it's because the problem they're trying to solve is purpose. They're not trying to actually solve specific challenges or problems. The specific challenge or problem is purpose. And so having constant and perpetual problems thrown at you that only my ideology can solve is an attempt at having a purpose in life, right? It's not solving issues, it's reifying ideologies, right? I want my ideology to be real and true, and I want everybody to adopt it. And only complete and total, again, domination will sate my appetite for this.
Well, and speaking of that, that's how it used to be, right? If you went to war with another tribe in ancient times, winning meant you destroyed the entire other tribe, their ideology, their physicality. You might take their loot, maybe even their women and children, potentially, but most of that, the men are going to be slaughtered, and you're going to just kill everything and wipe out as much as you can because you want to have a total win, a total dominant win over that other tribe, their ideology, everything.
Yeah, there was time periods in history that certainly basically said if you're going to take over another tribe, you've got to obliterate them. Especially, I think in prehistory times, it may have not been so cut and dry. But by the time we're recording history and we're in the Graves model, basically Graves level 3 or spiral dynamics red, when you get to that point, yeah, it's when you beat another tribe, you wipe them out. They don't exist anymore. And as we developed as humans and became more, Graves level 4 or blue, then things became ideological. We definitely went to war with each other, and Graves 4 can be very bloody. But it's more about the ideology. It's my truth versus your truth. And that's the ground that we are standing on.
A lot of Cold Wars, too.
Lots of Cold Wars. And right now, when we are in a very 5 orange time period, you can see everything is an economic war. That's basically what we're in. We're in huge economic wars because we are definitely fully invested in 5/orange. And we have pockets of 6 green, right? Like if you're familiar with the model, and if you, the listener, are not familiar with this, we've done multiple podcasts on the Graves model, spiral dynamics. When we get to green and 6, it doesn't turn violent physically, but it's very ideologically dominating. Like there's some people who call green or 6 the mean green meme, and it's because 6 doesn't really like anything that doesn't agree with its more communal ideas. It wants everybody in a collective and believing and thinking the same thing, and it also has an appetite for dominance. It argues that it wants everybody to have a voice, but as long as that voice doesn't go against what it wants, then those voices are fine. But if it goes against the Greens' ideals, then that voice has to be completely obliterated. And so ideas become the thing that is on the chopping block, not people. And as we grow, I mean, what's interesting is that there's this sentiment that as you go up the spirals, somehow we become more human. And if you're calling humanity a reluctance to kill each other physically, that's probably true. But all the same, I would argue, bloodthirsty tendencies still live inside of us. We're just now putting it into a frame that makes us feel like we're further along. And there is something to be said for turning battles ideological as opposed to physical, right? There is something to be said for conflict and not going to the physical point. Unfortunately, when people get so invested in their ideologies, when they become so attached to them that they go to battle like we used to go to battle, on the plains, mano a mano. When you get to that point, people's fervor gets high enough so that it might descend back into violence in physical battles because the same instinct is there, domination. Just like your brother walked away and that wasn't satisfying to you. You were not a gracious winner in that moment. You wanted him to feel all of the implications of caring about it as much as you do and then also experiencing defeat. That was the only win that you would accept. There's something to be said for that ideologically. There are people who not only want to reify their ideas, reify by making them true with a capital T. There's people not only want to do that, but they also want to see in the eyes of their enemy capitulation. They want to see that person has felt the feeling of complete domination, even if it's simply ideological. And that's the only win that they'll accept.
So unless you are planning on destroying, like fundamentally destroying your quote-unquote enemy, the person you are in either verbal, ideological battle with, unless you're going to kill them, like literally kill them and wipe them off the face of the planet, we as humans have to get better at winning. We've got to find ways to be better and better at winning if we're going to cohabitate with the people that we quote-unquote win over, unless we're just going to wipe them off the planet, which, I mean, I'm sure there are some people that believe that's the best way to do it.
Well, and are doing that right now.
Yeah. But I would say that humanity doesn't really want that on a giant scale. I think we have, as a humanity, we've seen enough people evolve to a place where we don't just want to wipe out our enemies. We still want to win, but we don't want to just kill our enemies. We want to have a provision for them to still exist. But how is that created? Like, how do you do that and not have their ideology and all their, now that they've lost, they're going to be they're not going to lose and just be like, okay, fine, whatever. I'm not going to believe what I believe anymore. Like, they're going to still have all that. So how do you go through all these things and win graciously?
Yeah, it's funny that we're appalled when people kill somebody else for having the wrong thoughts or ideas or whatever. But we are totally fine with people behaving almost the exact same way, but just turning ideological. And I think the challenge here is that winning and losing, competition is so baked into us and our humanness, right? Competition is a big part of who we are. That we will keep competition going even if that means we have to manufacture it. Like, that's the whole point of sports. So there's a lot of benefit to competition that we are loath to get rid of. And if we don't understand the point of competition and the point of winning and losing, if we lose sight of that, then we're just mindlessly competing. And again, that gives us a sense of purpose. So sometimes we're doing this and we don't want to be good winners and we don't want to be good losers because this idea of our ideology winning gives us purpose. It's almost religious in nature. And I see a lot of religiosity. Having grown up in a very, very culty religion, in one that required people to believe a certain set of ideas, otherwise you're out. It is disconcerting. Like when I left, I felt like I was in this space of complete and total freedom. I was like, oh my gosh, I can believe anything that I want to believe and it's totally fine. And the world will make space for my beliefs, right? Unlike my previous dynamic or my previous paradigm where I had no space for my own personal beliefs. And I did have that space for a time, but now I feel like I'm seeing a lot of similarities in the world around me for the same insistence that people align themselves with a certain set of beliefs, or they're bad, wrong, and need to be given the boot out of the tribe. So this is really, it's like I felt a sense of tasted freedom for a small amount of time, and suddenly now I'm out of the pot and into the flame, or at least that's kind of how it feels. So when I look at all of this and I go, okay, so if we're using competition as our purpose in life, and we're using the feeling of competition between, ideological competition, if we're using this as our basis for a purpose, then how on earth are you going to get people out of this dynamic? And I don't know if we actually can. I think people are really invested in this, and it might just be a time period in the life. It was a time period in my life to believe that I had the truth with a capital T and everybody else was wrong. So I understand the purpose of it. I understand why people need to feel this way. Like, my truth is the only truth. My side is the side of rightness. Whether or not you want to say that, God is with you, or you're on the right side of history, or whatever is your ultimate arbiter of truth. I understand wanting to believe you have it, and I understand wanting to compete against people who are, in your mind, potentially undermining your truth. They're making you doubt because they don't agree with you. Suddenly you have doubts inside of yourself. Well, what if they're right and I'm wrong? But that's a really, really unconscious thought. All you know is that somebody disagrees with you and they have to be eliminated. That needs to happen. And so there's a time period in our life where that's just sort of where we're at developmentally, and that makes, that there's a sense to that. But we all need to grow past it, right? It's not the acme. You believing you have truth with a capital T is not the acme of reality. It's a phase. It's a time period in your life that you are meant to graduate from, particularly in a world that gives you lots of other levels to graduate to. So if you're holding on so tightly to everything, then one of the ways to overcome this dynamic, to get out of this place where my truth is the only thing that matters, and like other people who disagree with me are clearly in the wrong, and we need to dominate them, and we need to see it. We need to see the life go out of their eyes when they care about this as much as we do, but we've dominated them. The only way I think to really get beyond that kind of thinking is to train people, or to remind people why competition exists in the first place, not to just give you a purpose of life, but there are a lot of benefits that come along with competition. But those only come along with competition if you are a good winner or a good loser, right? That's the only way that you get those benefits. If you aren't a good winner or a good loser, you strip the nutrients out of what competition can give you. So I think talking a little bit about the gifts that competition give us, outside of just having a purpose to, again, trying to make my ideology truth with a capital T, I think it's good to remember all of the benefits that competition will give us if we're in the right frame, and all the benefits of being a good winner and a good loser will give us, and then sort of understand where we fit in all of this. Like, maybe I don't need to be totally dominant in order to get all of the benefits that come along with this, and I don't have to see the light go out of my competitor's eyes in order to reap the benefits. Because quite honestly, when you're in that frame, you don't get the benefits of competition. And that's why you end up on this hamster wheel of purpose, right? I need this. I need to have other people see how true and right I am. And then you're just in this hamster wheel because you're not getting the meal. You're not getting all of the benefits. So you keep chasing after them. It's never satisfying. And so you keep, there's like almost that concept of inconsistent reward. right? Like the rats in the experiment they did when there was a button, and every time the rat or the mouse hit the button, there was a food pellet that came out. And if every time they hit it, a food pellet came out, they actually ended up only hitting it when they were hungry. And then they had the button set up so that every time they hit the button, nothing came out. And eventually I can't remember if it's the mice or rats, eventually lost interest. But then they set one up that was a button associated with these food pellets that gave a food pellet inconsistently. There was no pattern to it. It just inconsistently gave a food pellet. It's called inconsistent reward. And what ended up happening is that the mice and the rats got obsessed with the button. They wouldn't stop hitting it. They hit it constantly and consistently. It's the same principle as like gambling based, like those slot machines. If you don't know when you're going to win, then you do it obsessively. And I think what ends up happening in competition, particularly ideological competition, is that you get inconsistent reward. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and you can never predict when that happens. And so people get obsessed with this idea of having to always be in battle, right? That gives them purpose. It gives them inconsistent reward. They get obsessed with it. If you can step back and look at competition in its proper place and understand why it exists, and that competition itself, I don't believe, should ever become your purpose in life unless you have named it that. Like a person who's maybe a top tier athlete, they know that the competition of that athletic sport is their purpose in life. They've already acknowledged that. And so they own it and they recognize that. I think that that's fine. But if you don't realize that my truth versus your truth is effectively the same thing, you've turned this competition into your purpose. I think when you aren't aware of it, that's when you run into a lot of trouble.
So as a practical thing, I am feeling an ideological battle in myself right now. In my life, I believe that leaning to the side of individualism is more beneficial than collectivism. And I have a temptation to say that's the right ideology. That's the right way to be, individualistic, no collectivism at all. And ideologically fight for individualism, make sure the individual's empowered. We don't empower the collective. In fact, we want the individual to win out. And I think when I was younger, I probably would have been more bombastic about that, more intense, more complete in that feeling. And as I've gotten older and more wise, hopefully wise, I'll put that in air quotes, I realized, well, that's stupid. One side of an ideology is not better than the other. You're going to still need us as humans to collectively make decisions and come together. So for my ideology to win, first of all, what does that even look like? What is the metric of that winning out? If my ideology of what I believe is really the best way to live my life as an individual, working on myself, growing myself, I'm the only person that I have control over. So I have to focus inward and work on myself. I can't fix society, but I can work on myself. And hopefully by working on myself and encouraging other people to do the same, society will get better over time, because that's all we can do is focus on ourselves. Some people disagree with that. They think you fix society out there and somehow that's going to fix you internally. Like, you correct things out here, calibrate outwardly, and that, by definition, will force the inner calibration. I see it differently. I see the inner calibration going outward. So that's a difference of opinion. But I know that winning fully for the idea of individualism would lose an entire alternate perspective, which is collectivism. Me winning wouldn't be a real win. Like my ideas, my ideology, my thoughts around this really wouldn't be a real win. I think there is a place for collective thinking. I just don't think it's a place that trumps individualist thinking. So there's this tension point that comes between the two as I really think about it. I'm like, actually, it's more of a tension between these two nodes in a system. And obviously there's other factors, other models, other ideas and ideologies coming in here too. But I'm just using this as a really zoomed in example. There's really no metric of what individualism winning looks like. So that means that how do I even know if I would ever win? But there's almost this struggle now. We connect ourselves to an ideology like that, and then it becomes about winning for that ideology because we're actually fighting against the other one from winning. I'm trying to prevent collectivism overrunning. Like if I really get down to the lowest levels of my motivations, it's not that I want individualism to only be the law of the land. It's that I just don't want collectivism to only be the law of the land. So it's more of a defensive battle. And so there's no metric. I'm just kind of in this keep collectivist thinking at bay I don't want to destroy it. I don't want it to go off the planet. My age and wisdom says we need that. I just don't want it to rule over me as an individual. I want to still have that individual expression. Obviously, some of this is wrapped up in my personality type and other things. Other types feel differently just based on their cognitive wiring. I know that too. And I think to be a good winner in that then is to really get clear about what is it that I am after in the first place. Even before I think about like having won something, what is it that I'm actually after? And so that's really abstract. I know that's super, like there's an ideology there, but I can feel like I can feel the emotion and the motivation to battle and struggle and fight for this inside of myself. So I'm using that as a way to start the conversation around, I still want to say that we do not know, most people don't know what they're actually trying to win at. They just know what they don't want. It's like winning means I don't get the thing I don't want, or I hold back the thing I don't want. It doesn't mean I get the thing I do want. We will be right back. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker. Now back to the show.
Sometimes individualism is the right tool for the job, and sometimes collectivism is the right tool for the job. Well, and I think that's the important thing about this idea is that, and you mentioned tension points, when we won't see the arguments for the other side, when we are only trying to, like you said, defend or hold at bay what feels like the other side of our perspective, and we don't want that, then oftentimes we do get caught up in this battle, this fight, right? It feels like a fight of good versus evil. It feels like, collectivism is the evil and individualism is the good and I'm fighting against it.
Or vice versa.
I very much vice versa. Collectivism is the good and individualism is the bad. I mean, I've seen a lot of arguments in articles effectively making those statements on both sides. All right.
Yeah.
And I have a bias towards individualism as well, but I also recognize that it's not always the right tool for the job. Sometimes collectivism is the right tool. So when you are in these battles and these concepts are competing against each other, the reason why they're in competition at all is because both of them need to exist. We need people talking about individualism, and we need them fighting for that principle. And we need people talking about collectivism and fighting for that principle, because sometimes each one of them is the right tool for the job contextually. It depends on the system that's built. When you look at the systems thinking and nodes and systems, there are some systems that perform way better with collectivism than they do with individualism. And I say that as somebody who's highly individualistic. And there are some systems that are the opposite. So when we look at competition, what we're really actually looking at is tension. And taking it back to the original or conversation point, which is winning and losing is very similar. You want to win and lose in life. You're going to win and lose in life. Both of them are inevitable, sometimes accidental, right? We win. I mean, in some ways you could say that just the fact that we were born at all makes us winners, right? We were the sperm that had the to exist, when you look at it, is such a ridiculously unlikely thing. The sperm has to choose the right fallopian tube, right? There's two tubes it could choose, and of the millions and millions of sperm, 50% of them went down the wrong tube, and your sperm just happened to choose the right one. So there's luck involved. And then there's speed. It got there maybe earlier than a bunch of other ones. And then there's stamina. Sometimes it can take the sperm hours, if not days, to penetrate the egg. And so you as a sperm, right, if you think about you as a little sperm, you were lucky, you were fast, and you had high stamina. And then you were the first one to enter the egg, and boom, now you exist, right? Now you had the possibility and the potential to exist. So we start our lives out as being winners, and we're going to end as losers. We're going to die, right? All of us will be dying. So both winning and losing are inevitable in life, from the womb to the tomb, right? So winning and losing are both intrinsic parts of reality, and they teach us different things. If we allow those lessons to hit us, if we allow ourselves to integrate the lessons of both winning and losing by being good winners and good losers, then we'll be able to take these intrinsic lessons of life. And then when we sit with and understand these intrinsic lessons in life, when we look at our purpose, when we look at the competitions that come at us in incidentals or in our ideologies or in athletics or competing for a job or competing for whatever it is, whatever we're competing for, we can understand it on a philosophical level. It doesn't just have to be like, I didn't get that win, and so now my life is crumbling, or I did win and all you losers can suck it, right? Like, we get really much more rich lessons. And then we are a lot less likely to be overly attached to our ideologies because our ideologies winning doesn't feel like the end all be all. We're not going to attach purpose to our ideologies winning. We're going to attach purpose to something grander, something bigger, and see these wins and losses as something that is just a part of the cycle of life. So one of the things that being a good winner gives you is it gives you self-confidence. It allows you to feel better about yourself. Like, you tested your mettle and you achieved. And so in terms of that concept of modesty, which is, we've done an entire podcast on the idea of modesty, which is not thinking too highly of yourself, but also not thinking too lowly of yourself, having an accurate self-assessment. What winning does is it allows you to understand when you have done better. Like, you now can have the self-confidence of having achieved. Most of the time, winning isn't accidental. Most of the time, winning also comes along with skill development and energy and intention and all sorts of other components that helps you know that you've got it in you to do that. And so you've overcome obstacles. When we overcome obstacles, we get self-worth. We understand that we have value. We gain self-esteem. And we also have higher others' worth, meaning that when we win, oftentimes we get the accolades and appreciation from the people outside of ourselves. So winning is healthy. It's really healthy for us to have wins in life. And you can see what happens when people don't have enough wins, right? They get dejected. They kind of crumble in on themselves. They go on a trajectory of lack of self-confidence and lack of self-worth. They don't really understand where they fit in all of that. And so when we don't have enough opportunities to basically validate our ego, which is what winning does, it validates our ego as it is. When we don't have enough of those opportunities, we become obsessed with the lack of validation for our ego. Oftentimes our ego becomes really important to us, but in a negative way. We're nursing our wounds all the time. We feel broken. We feel down and depressed. So winning is important. Having a lot of wins or having enough wins is crucial for us to understand who we are and where we fit in all of it.
I think I'm seeing a distinction here between physical winning and emotional winning. Physical winning is like, I'm a politician, I run for election, I win the election. That's the physical win. But then there's an emotional component too. I need to feel like I won. Let's say I won, but let's say I don't feel like I won. I'm going to still feel like I lost. I think the emotions probably play a way bigger role than what we actually get winning. And most people, when they quote unquote are bad winners, it's that they might have actually physically won something, but they didn't feel like they emotionally won. They feel like they emotionally lost or didn't get the win. And so they behave like a bad winner for some reason. I think for some reason as a kid, when I won at Monopoly, I would stand up like, nah, I won, you lost. Something about it emotionally, I didn't actually feel like I won. Or something, maybe it's not tied to the game. It's like in life, I feel disempowered or something. So I had to really, this one physical win now, I'm really going to latch onto it and really tell you how much it's important and really, towards you, because that emotion of winning is what I'm actually after. It's not actually the game of winning. It's I want to feel like a winner. I want to feel like I've got worth, like you're talking about. So these wins help us build that self-esteem, self-confidence. That's what we're after in the first place anyway.
Yeah, poor winning through gloating is often overcompensating.
Yeah.
Right? You're trying to just suck as much juice out of that lemon as you possibly can, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to get absolutely every tiny little scrap of self-worth that you can out of it because you're in a deficit, right? Poor winning usually shows a deficit of self-esteem. And so if you put yourself in positions where you can, scale up, build skill, win through scaling up, and then really feel the emotional impact of every one of those wins, then you don't have to overcompensate ever. Like, you got the nutrients, right? You were a good winner. You sat with your win. You were able to let it really make you feel good, help you understand that maybe you're better than you thought you were before, and recalibrate for that. And, just really let it get the nutrients from that dish, from that meal. And overcompensating by being, by gloating or being an ungracious winner, it shows that you're actually rejecting the nutrients, right? You're trying to compensate for maybe a feeling of starvation from before. And so putting yourself in more situations where you can win, even if they're small ones, is a great way to become a good winner. Just put yourself in a situation, like build a skill in something. Put yourself in competitive situations that aren't big ideological situations of like arguing with people on the internet. That's not a good way to teach yourself to be a good winner. But build a skill and put yourself in competitive situations on a regular basis so that you can build a skill of good winning. So the opposite is being a good loser, or not the opposite, but the other side of that coin is being a good loser. And the value that being a good loser, or what losing does for us, first understanding the point and purpose of losing, helps us become a better loser, because we recognize that there's value here. There's like good things that are happening while we lose. So just like winning is a test iterate that shows us what worked, losing is a test iterate that shows us what didn't work. So it's also calibrative. It allows us to see what our failings are, or maybe weak points. It's a stress test. It shows us what we need to continue to work on in order, what skills need to be developed, or maybe it was just timing, or maybe it was something out of our control. But if it is within our control, then we're able to do better, right? We're able to hone our skills better, because now we have a light shone on a dark place. So if we are good losers, then we'll allow the opportunity of having lost do that for us. We'll allow it to be a moment of the outer world giving us feedback that encourages us to become better. And that's one of the most valuable lessons that losing gives us. It gives us a sense of something that was important, that was taken from us, is galvanizing. It encourages us to want it again, and then reach out and work harder to get it. It's also, because it's inevitable, it's an opportunity to build self-worth outside of objectives, meaning that when winning gives us a sense or a boost of self-confidence, losing can actually give us a boost of self-worth. We can detether our sense of ourself and our worth internally. We detether it from outside accolades. We go, am I going to let this moment, am I going to let this create such a wound inside of me that I can't overcome it? Well, of course not. I'm going to overcome the obstacle of the ego hit. And in that way, I can understand that, I do have worth outside of this. I'm still a person that's valuable. I still have things to offer and give. And winning doesn't really teach you that lesson as well as losing does. Losing really encourages you to detether your self-worth and self-value only from your reaching outside objectives. And I think finally, one of the most valuable things that losing does is it's a moment to experience a little tiny mini ego death. I thought of myself in a certain way. I was fairly confident that I was, good enough at this that I put myself in a position to win. I didn't win. Now I have to reevaluate where I was at. I have to reevaluate myself and reevaluate my talents or skills or whatever it is. And a little part of me kind of dies, right? It's an ego hit. And almost every ego hit is a little mini ego death. Ego deaths, these little mini ego deaths, are crucial. They're so important for us to not get too attached to our ego in a self-aggrandizing way. It helps us to become philosophical about all of this, right? It allows us to create a philosophical frame about how it's okay that we lose sometimes. And so losing is just as valuable to us and our growth and development as winning is, but only if we are a good loser, just like only if we're a good winner.
I have a quick thought I want to explore, a little side tangent, no more than 5 minutes, really quick. It just came up as we've been talking. I have a belief that all gameplay is based on deception. Basically all, American football, for example, you're trying to set up a play that deceives the other team of what you're going to do in that play. And there's some athleticism there too. You have to be strong and fast and throw the ball well and catch it, but you're trying to trick the other team into what you're going to do to advance the ball. And I think most gameplay is around not necessarily deception directly, but it might be around outthinking, using leverage or technicalities to win, deceiving. You hold your cards close, like literally in a game of poker. You don't want to give away. It's all about deception, right? You're not trying to, and you're trying to figure out how the other person's deceiving you. So most gameplay is based on deception, leveraging unfair advantages, outthinking your opponent. So I wonder if the reason why it's hard, this is really hard to talk about outside the realm of gameplay, is because we're used to, back in the day, winning meant, again, destruction, completely wiping out another society maybe or something. But now in our modern world, we don't do that. We simulate a lot of conflict through gameplay, and gameplay is based on these leverages and this deception. So when we come into the quote-unquote real world, when the stakes are real, it's not just a game. It's not a football game or a card game we're playing. It's like a political persuasion or a policy we want to see put in place or an ideology we want to see people live their lives by. Now the stakes are way higher, and so we assume the person that won, based on gameplay, used leverage, trickery, outthinking, deception to get there. So it's really hard to lose because an ego hit comes because we're like, wow, we got deceived, we got outthought. It's really hard to think that we're dumb enough to have that happen to us.
And I think that when it comes to ideologies, if you switch, basically what you're talking about is being outsmarted, outfoxed.
I think so.
Having a better gauge on cloaking intent.
Yeah.
Right. And
we see that happen in the real world too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And so when you lose, it feels like, oh man, we got outsmarted. Unfortunately, when you then change the frame to something ideological, as opposed to being smart and less smart or dumb or whatever, it gets turned into good versus evil, right? If we won, then that is a validation of how good we are, and you lost because you're evil or you're bad. And
or you won because you're evil.
Yeah, or you won because you're evil. Well, I mean,
you won because you guys are evil and you tricked it all and you rigged it this way or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And we call that cognitive distortion quadrant thinking, meaning that when you are so associated with your ideology or the way that you're thinking, you will create these little quadrants where no matter how you look at it, you're always in the right.
Yeah.
Like if I'm right, I'm on the side of good and I won, then me winning is a validation that I'm good, right? But if you won, you're evil, and you winning proves that you did it through deception and ill means, so it's just validation of you being evil. Yeah. And if I lose and I know that I'm good, my loss is validation that I wasn't going to do all of the dirty tricks that you did. And so therefore, once again, it's a validation of me being good because I wasn't going to enter the game the way that you did. But if you lose and you're evil, that's a validation that you're evil because good always wins out over time. Yeah. So it's this way of sort of creating these little quadrant, we call it quadrant thinking. No matter how you mix it up, I'm always going to come out right and you're always going to come out wrong. Yeah. And that's the point of all of that. And I think when it comes to things that are ideological, we create all of these quadrants. We create all of these rules that always will show that we came out on top, even if we didn't. And that's a sign of both being a poor winner and a poor loser, as opposed to conceding and going, okay, I guess it's just not my time right now. Or what are the lessons I can take from this? I'm still forcing, because this is my purpose in life, I'm still trying to force myself into this good versus evil frame. And I think when it comes to something that is ideological, the other challenge, well, this is probably one of the bigger challenges, is that I'm just one voice in an ocean of them. There's a bunch of people who think like me, and when they win, I win. So I get all of the ego benefits from actually just simply my side winning, right? And I might not have done anything except for maybe enter Twitter battles every once in a while, or put my ideological persuasion into my Twitter handle.
It goes back to gameplay. I'm watching the football game. When my team wins, I feel like I win. My ego feels good about that.
Exactly. And then when we lose, it's like this big collective loss, and we've got to all justify why the other side was so evil in their win. But I think it comes down to this idea of not recognizing what what is basically turning a game into your purpose in life and over-identifying with it. So getting back down to brass tacks on the purpose of competition. The purpose of competition is to, what does Robin Williams say in Dead Poet Society? The purpose of competition is to push us to excel. That's its purpose. And when we push ourselves to excel, sometimes we lose. And when we lose, that tells us that we need to excel even more. We need to get galvanized and go further. But if we start to say that winning is a symbol of our superiority as humans, or our goodness as humans, then a loss makes us feel like we're not as good, and now we have to justify it. Now we have to try to figure out, now we got to get in that quadrant and try to figure out how my loss is actually a symbol that the other person is more evil. And then we don't take any of the lessons out of it, right? We can't take any of the actual legitimate self reevaluation, the modesty component, the calibration component, the recognition that when I lose, this isn't personal, right? This has nothing to do with good versus evil. It might not even have to do with intelligence versus lack of intelligence. It just sometimes is. And if I get back out there and I work harder, then maybe I'll get some wins myself. When we tie all of this competition, which is basically one big game being played, and I know people hate that idea, by the way. They hate the idea that this is a game. They hate the idea that this isn't all empirically true and this is super, super serious and all of us should be taking this super seriously, forgetting that we have gone through these cycles ad infinitum throughout all of history, right? It always feels like right now is the most intense, important time period in history, but that's just because it's the time period in history in which we're living, right? And we always puff our importance up as individuals. So because I'm experiencing this time period in history, obviously this time period in history is the most important, so therefore the stakes have never been higher. Maybe that's the way it is, or maybe we're just always playing a game. Always, always, always. And the more seriously you play it, it might not actually help you win, right? Because you lose all of those, because you take it so seriously and you over-identify with your side so much, and you give no quarter to the other side, and you're a terrible winner and a terrible loser. And because of all of that, you're less likely to come out on top. You're actually sabotaging your own ability to have your quote unquote side win because you've been so poor at all of this. So I think we should go into what happens after you win. And what does it mean to be a good winner, and what are all the benefits that come along with it, or maybe just what it would look like?
And this is based on the assumption that you're not going to destroy your enemy, right? You're going to cohabitate. You're going to live around the people group or the person that you won against. I think and we've seen this in different wars that have happened in the last 200-300 years. Societies have won a war and they've allowed the people group that they defeated to exist. Now, they might have had some boundaries and parameters put on them, but they've allowed them to exist. They didn't wipe them off the face of the planet.
Well, I think we went from wiping people off the face of the planet to letting them exist, but in a broken state.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to graduate even beyond that to allowing them to exist, but also, like you said, cohabitate. And I think that's the sticking point. The sticking point is that if we're going to go to the next level, it means that we don't want our enemies to be broken. We want them to, we want them to be strong. And a lot of people can see that in the past. When colonies came in and took over lands from indigenous peoples, they let them live sometimes, right? There was a lot of battling that happened, but they might have allowed those indigenous tribes to exist, but they made sure that they were in a broken state where they couldn't come back after them. And all of us find that to be horrific, right? Almost everybody in the modern world is like, that's terrible, but we still try to do that ideologically. And so what you're talking about, Joel, is what happens when we graduate beyond that? What happens when we graduate beyond leaving our enemy broken and allowing our enemy to remain intact and whole?
I think the first thing that happens when you win, your quote-unquote enemy or your opposition immediately is having an ego challenge. So from my viewpoint, being a good winner means the first thing is you've got to give them a way to save face. You have to give them a little bit of an out, because I don't think that they're going to be able to deal with it unless you provide that for them. I can think of one of my children recently. We're having a disciplinary time period, and he was unwilling to go upstairs to his bedroom when it was the appropriate time to do that. I remember saying to him, I said, look, as your father, I have to win this battle. Like, I have to win it. So we can spend the next 6, 8, 10 hours battling this out, but I will die before I let you win this battle. I have to win it as your father because you need to respect me. It's just how it has to be.
Well, it's the dynamic of the family. If a child can't respect their parent, then you've just given birth to a whole host of problems.
But I also knew, and we got to the place where he was about ready to capitulate, but I knew that I had to give him a way to save face in order to salve his ego, because I got what I wanted basically as his father. So I said, look, I'm going to go in the other room, and I expect you to be in your room by the time I get back in about 5 minutes, because I wanted to give him an option to be able to go ahead and go to his room without the embarrassment of having me stand there and watch him do it and the whole family. So everybody leaves the room, and then he can quietly slip out and save face. And it worked. He was able to get up there, and then the next day we were able to unpack it and talk about it. He came and apologized. Imagine if I had made him stand up and walk out of the room upstairs in front of the whole family and me, and just how humiliating that is. It just probably wouldn't have worked.
Well, you didn't insist on seeing the defeat in his eyes.
Yeah.
Unlike with your brother, where you were almost insisting on it when you were a teenager, you're seasoned enough to know that he was going to acknowledge your quote unquote win as a father, but you did not insist on seeing the damage in his eyes while it was happening.
Yeah.
So in that moment, it was a good moment to allow him to save face.
And ultimately, it was a great next day. We were able to have a conversation. He apologized. It was great. Like, it was a parenting moment that I consider a true win. And I allowed him to save face in that moment. And so I think that's a key component of winning well, is you've got to let the opposition salve their ego and feel okay.
Well, and then it becomes not about their ego, because if you don't give them an opportunity to save face, then the focus of attention is all on that not having saved face. It's all on the ego. If you allow people to save face, if you give them some space, then now it becomes more about the issue at hand, because they're not so obsessed with the fact that you broke them in front of you. It's now it's a totally different subject that they're focused on. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages to giving some people some space, right? Some space to let their ego do what it needs to do in order to be able to refocus on the topic.
Well, and that leads us to the next part, is when you lose a loved one, somebody passes away, you've lost something, you have to grieve their death. And that's the second thing, is you've got to give the opposition an avenue for thrashing and grief, because they just lost something. They have to grieve the loss that just happened. So they have to save face, and then they have to thrash and grieve what's now gone. And if you don't give that space, I think you're also going to have challenges. But a good winner, I think, gives the saving the face element and the gracious element of thrashing and grieving through that entire process.
Yeah, and everybody should know what it's like to feel that way. We've all lost. And so it shows some empathy. It shows that we recognize what it means to have lost something important to us. And we would have wanted that space. And so we'll give that space to others. As, again, it's a little mini death, right? It's a little mini ego death. And so giving people an opportunity to nurse that, I think, once again, refocuses it back on the issue and takes it away from just the ego experience.
And then I think finally there needs to be an avenue of reconnection, reconciliation, or forgiveness, whatever the situation requires. It may not be a forgiveness, like they need to seek forgiveness from you. It might have just been, like outside the realm of like a personal dynamic. It might just be your ideas won out of over somebody else at the office. But there needs to be a way for the reconnection to happen now. You don't want to have, from my perspective, a winner. You don't want to create a bunch of enemies perpetually where, well, I'm winning and now I've got all these enemies all over the place that hate me because I won over them. I think there's a reconnection period, a reconciliation, a restorative element to this, or forgiveness if that's needed, in order to have a complete process and be a good winner. Give an avenue for that. I can't imagine winning and then somebody coming and wanting to reconnect and me being like, no, absolutely not, and like rejecting that. There might be avenues for that. I'm having a hard time thinking about a situation where that would be appropriate. But I think reconnection, forgiveness, again, I grew up with a religious framework, so this is baked into me how I see things. It's always on the table in my mind. Other people without a religious upbringing might have really good reasons why forgiveness, reconciliation, reconnection is not appropriate. And obviously you don't want to, your boundaries, like if somebody in my family was stealing from me to go buy hard drugs like heroin or something, and they kept coming into our house and staying with us and stealing our stuff, and I win and I get them out of the house. Forgiveness and reconciliation doesn't mean let them back in the house to steal from me and continue to buy heroin. I don't think that's what I'm suggesting. But in most cases, we're not talking about a situation like that. We're talking about winning over an ideology or getting my person elected or having this business idea get accepted by the boss and yours didn't. And I think in those moments, there can be reconciliation and reconnection.
And well, I mean, I think it's the the opposite, which is holding a grudge.
Yeah.
Even as a winner, you can hold a grudge against the loser.
Yeah.
And when you're a poor winner, that's what you do. You hold a grudge or you hold it against them. And the same thing with being poor losers. We carry these grudges and we hold it against them, pretending as if we didn't need to cooperate for some future venture. Like if this person, like you said, if you're not going to destroy your enemy, if you're not going to completely wipe them off the map, then there's going to be a moment when you might need to rely on them or vice versa. So keeping the issue going, keeping the challenge going. And the only thing I can think of in the modern world to keep hostilities going is that there's a benefit to somebody to keep hostilities going. Mm-hmm. And sometimes entire industries are built over some of these issues and challenges, particularly in the social ecosystem. If somebody's getting paid to keep hostilities going, they're going to keep hostilities going because they're getting paid. And if there's reconciliation, then those people don't get paid anymore. And so now they've got to synthetically prop up problems, challenges, and issues. This happens ideologically all the time. There are people who basically get paid to point out in a religious way, whether it's theological or secular, to point out how the other guy is the bad guy. And so there is monetary advantage, resource advantage to propping it up. But that's kind of awful. And it also pretends as if that money train is going to keep going. And it's a very self-centered way of looking at things. It's a very self-focused, not looking at the broader ecosystem way of looking at things. So unless you're getting paid to keep hostilities going, there's really no benefit to it. It just means that now you don't, like you said, you've just made enemies. You don't have these people who could potentially have your back in the future and you have their back. You can see good sportsmanship in competition, like in athletic competition. When people have good sportsmanship, that's a good thing, particularly for players, because in most sports that I can think of, players don't just stay with that one team for their entire careers. Somebody that you might have created a really bad dynamic with when you were on two different teams, you might end up playing on the same team in the future. So there's a lot of benefit in being a good winner and a good loser. There's a lot of benefit in sportsmanship, being good at that, because you might need to rely on each other in the future. When it comes to ideological perspectives, the same thing happens. You might need to have this person's back and they might need to have your back if you go against a common enemy. And we pretend as if we only have each other as enemies, again, ideologically. But we might need to rely on each other. And in fact, we should, particularly when we're in the same country or in the same state or in the same county or, however things are separated globally. When you have a neighbor, like a literal neighbor who has has their opinion as the opposite of your opinion, to keep hostilities going is asinine. It's ridiculous because you might literally need to rely on this person in the future. We don't know what the future holds. So keeping these challenges going synthetically is I think very, very short-sighted. But you can see the rifts in families happening, as if you're not going to need to rely on your family in the future. I know what it's like to have been kicked out of a family because of having different ideology, and it is incredibly painful. And yet we act like it's no big deal. We are very cavalier about this idea of severing family relationships because people are in different political, sides of the aisle, or because somebody else thinks something different than you do. How cavalier is that? I say this as somebody, again, who got booted from my family, and the scars and wounds that come from it, things that I'm still and probably will always be dealing with. The idea of just, going, well, nope, sorry, you're on the other ideological side, so you're out. I mean, it's like, really, you don't think you're ever going to need to rely on these people ever again? I just have like medical history questions that I'll never get answered because I need this information, but I'm not allowed to talk to people who are the arbiters of this information, right? So the idea of not giving grace, the idea of having a battle maybe on Thanksgiving Day and over turkey, right? And arguing about two different political persuasions and recognizing that you're never going to convince them and they're never going to convince you. And this idea of like flouncing after that and going, well, too bad. I'm, going away as the victor only by ignoring your enemy at that point. These are very short-sighted ways of looking at things. And they also show that you are a very poor winner and loser. Like, you don't understand the purpose of competition if this is your mindset. And so I think that last piece, Joel, that you just mentioned is so critical. It's so important to have an opportunity for reconciliation because we're humans. We're all humans, and we're all going to need each other at some point.
So what do you think? You've been listening along. You haven't had a microphone on your side, but now's your chance to come over to personalityhacker.com and directly below this episode, leave your comment, maybe ask a question or share your story about a dynamic where maybe you've lost, a dynamic where maybe you've won. How do you define a good winner? How do you show up as a winner in your life? Do you agree? Do you think there's letting your enemy or your opponent save face, thrash, and process their grief, and then find a pathway for reconciliation? Or do you disagree with that idea? They should be destroyed and wiped off the face of the planet. We should, maybe not literally kill them, but in all other ways, economically, socially, destroy them and remove them from society in a lot of ways, make them a pariah that has to live on the edges of our society. There are some people that actually believe that, more than you'd think too. So what is your opinion? We'd love to hear from you. Again, personalityhacker.com, directly below this episode.
Yeah, it's modern day barbarism, right? And I say that going back to Conan the Barbarian, where one of my favorite lines in any movie ever is in Conan the Barbarian, where he says, "What is best in life?" And he says, "To see your enemies driven before you and to hear the lamentations of their women." And this is it's coming back in vogue.
Is that Arnold that says that
it's
in his
Arnold.
voice?
Oh, in perfect Arnold accent.
I wish I could do that accent. That's such a great line.
Not even gonna try because I will butcher the hell out of it. But that barbarism is coming back into vogue to hear the lamentations of the women of the people that you've canceled. So I think it's a relevant question. How do you treat quote unquote losers and winners? Are there opportunities for reconciliation? There always should be, in my opinion. And I've come up in a religious context too, so I understand the importance of forgiveness and mercy. And I do think that that's one of the best gifts that religion can give you. So I think that those are all very relevant questions.
I just want to be very clear. We're not suggesting this person, if they're dangerous or needed to be fettered or restrained, like prisoners violent criminals probably need to be in prison. We're not suggesting, there's no consequences for behavior. That's not at all what we're saying. But of course, there might be boundaries or restrictions put upon somebody that's harming others, and you have to win over them.
Yeah, but that's not the subject of this podcast.
Exactly. That's not what we're talking about.
We've been talking about competition and ideological competition.
Exactly. But I just want to make sure because, I think people have a hard time not conflating those two things. They see things, life and death, almost criminal for ideologies at this point. So that's another piece of it too.
Yeah, well, I've got a lot to say on this concept that ideas are violence.
Another podcast.
Another podcast, maybe sometime way down in the future. My introverted thinking as an ENTP finds the idea that ideas are violence in and of themselves to be highly laughable, but that's a TI perspective. Anyway, if you enjoyed this podcast, after I talk about Conan the Barbarian and also my little hint of like the idea that ideas or violence is laughable. And that's an entire podcast subject in itself. If you enjoyed this particular podcast, which was talking about competition, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review for us on iTunes, that helps us out a lot. We have a book. It's called Personality Hacker. You can get it in all major book retailers. And if you leave us a rating and review on Amazon and on Goodreads, that also helps us out a lot. And we have not had a review of our book on Amazon for quite some time. It's been a few months. So you should go do that. Go do that. If you've read the book and you liked it, go tell other people that it was good. And that's a gift you can give to us. Reciprocity, if you will. So that would be awesome, and we would highly appreciate it. And of course, we have an entire suite of personal growth products, that are designed for your personality type. So head over to personalityhacker.com and look at our suite of programs in our catalog and see if there's one that's right for you. We have 2 programs actually specifically designed for INTPs and INTJs. It's called Unleashed. It's a fantastic program. We also have one specifically designed for INFPs and INFJs called Empowered, which is also an awesome program. So if you are one of those 4 types, go check that out.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we will talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning. We are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.